Welcome to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about the state's $53.1 billion spending plan and how it was approved this week in the early morning hours Wednesday. I'll then join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop.
Are you tired of news that puts politics over people? At the nonprofit Franklin News Foundation, we believe in putting people over politics by delivering nonpartisan news and audio content that serves you, the American taxpayer. With Franklin News Foundation, you can read fact-based, state-focused news for free at thecentersquare.com. You can listen to civil, balanced conversations between policy experts through our podcast network at americastalking.com. Or you can get in-depth news on K-12 education spending, curriculum, and school safety at chalkboardnews.com. It's all free through Franklin, where we put you, the American taxpayer, first in every story, episode, and conversation. And it's only possible through our supporters. Together, we can produce content that puts people over politics and brings Americans the news they deserve. Become a supporter today at franklinnews.org/donate. Once again, that's franklinnews.org/donate.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Here are some of the top stories from the past week. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's heralding a budget that Republicans say was crammed down taxpayers' throats in the dead of night. After the Senate approved the state budget package late in the evening Sunday, the House took up the measure in the early morning hours Wednesday. Republican State Representative Patrick Windhorst said Democrats in the supermajority violated their own rules by attempting to concur on one of the measures 3 times when rules only allow for 2 attempts.
I think it should be clear to everyone in this state what this supermajority is willing to do to ram a tax increase down the throats of the citizens of Illinois at 4:30 in the morning.
Pritzker was asked if it's responsible to pass such a large spending plan so early in the morning when people are sleep deprived.
The fact that they voted on it early in the morning was really a function of everybody wanted to go home.
The $53.1 billion spending plan is the most expensive taxpayer-funded state budget in Illinois history, 32% more than the state spent in 2019. And there was bipartisan opposition to the Illinois tax and spend policies approved this week. Democratic State Representative Fred Crespo said he sought cuts in the budget without success. The budget spends $400 million more than what the governor proposed. In future years, Crespo warned tax increases from increased spending have to come from somewhere.
There's really only one place you can look at getting these revenues, and that's taxpayers. And at this rate, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to run out of taxpayer dollars to spend.
The governor said it's a great budget and downplayed Democrats that voted against it. He said it's Republicans constantly complaining.
Wait till you see what they're going to tax you on next. Well, they've been saying this for every year that I've been in office, and it hasn't been true.
Despite the opposition, the tax and spend measure was approved. It's expected the governor will sign the plan. The next fiscal year begins July 1st. Those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at thecentersquare.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, I'll join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss the news. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Tired of being in the dark about what happens day to day under the dome in Springfield? Do you want to be more informed in the decision-making process? If so, you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch elected officials in action, holding them accountable, and having your say on issues that matter most to you. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to stay informed about Illinois state government and to be a more engaged citizen. Become a subscriber today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. We are recording this on Thursday, May 30th. Working into the wee hours of the morning some days, the Illinois legislature passed the most expensive spending plan in state history this week, with nearly $1 billion in new tax increases. Republican lawmakers criticized the lack of transparency and questionable voting practices surrounding the budget's passage. Joining me today to discuss this is Greg Bishop, the Center Square's Illinois Associate Editor. Greg, you and the Illinois team put in some long days and nights the past week plus until the budget passed. Why don't we just start with the details?
So $53.1 billion spending plan. It's the largest state budget in state history, and it spends like $13 billion more than when the governor took office in 2019. It increases taxes upwards to $1 billion. It pays for K through 12 and higher education, about a quarter of the budget. You've got $10+ billion that's going to the state's pensions, all kinds of road projects, and a host of other measures. But the tax increases also a part of this, and that's everything from capping the deduction that businesses can take on net operating losses, capping the discounts that retailers get for collecting and remitting sales taxes, to even a tiered tax on sports betting companies and a new tax on re-renting. And that's where you go to an online website to get a hotel room, and that vendor then works with the hotel to set that up, but you're essentially going through the vendor. There is going to be a new tax on that. So a pretty large, expansive plan, and legislators had, I would say, we saw details filed Friday, and those details coming out throughout the weekend. Legislators had very little time to actually pour through all of the details, especially as there were multiple amendments added before it ultimately passed the state Senate late Sunday. And then the House had to come back on Tuesday after Memorial Day to then work into the wee hours of the morning to approve that package. So it was the largest budget in state history, and something that states' taxpayers are going to see increases in a variety of different ways.
Now, Greg, there was, which is unusual in Illinois, some Democrats. Of course, Democrats hold a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. But some Democrats were pushing back hard against the tax increases in the budget. And that's one of the reasons why it took several votes before it could get passed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you recall, Dan, the Center Square, we reported on a memo that the governor sent to state agencies. This was about 3 weeks ago, leading up to what everybody knew was going to be the final couple of weeks of session where all of the budget making was going to be happening. The governor sent out a memo saying that the tax increase proposals he made in February are not popular, and the state agencies should be looking for $800 million in cuts. Now, he didn't say cuts, but he's talking about reduced spending levels from what he had proposed in February. We didn't see any cuts in this budget, Dan. We actually saw $400 million more than what the governor proposed in February. So that led to some, even the likes of Fred Crespo, a Democrat from Hoffman Estates in the State House of Representatives. He stood up and he talked about how he tried to get some reductions in spending for various agencies, but was not successful in doing that. And he talked about how the tax increase measures may not necessarily be towards the individual income tax payer or, raising the sales tax, for instance, but it's going to be an impact to taxpayers. And he said with all of the different budget constraints there are on state spending, including the end of federal COVID-19 relief dollars, that's a substantial amount of pressure that's going to be on the budget in future years. As they increase spending for different types of new programs, increased spending for K through 12, and early childhood development, and these types of things. And also to not just skip over, but another substantial part of the budget is $900+ million for non-citizen migrants. Everything from healthcare costs that taxpayers subsidize for those over the age of 42, including the direct services like housing and legal assistance, and even the welcoming centers throughout the state. All of that is a close to $1 billion that the state has budgeted. So with all of those pressures, Crespo said, you're going to have to come back for taxpayers' money somehow. And he said people need to vote their conscience. But yes, the process of actually getting this across the finish line, especially with Democrats, some of them pushing back on it and voting against the revenue package. They had to in the early morning hours Wednesday vote on it once, didn't have enough votes. They voted on it a second time, didn't have enough votes, and then they were able to reverse one of the no votes from the Democrats to a yes vote. Larry Walsh Jr. put out a statement today, or Thursday, that he couldn't stand by and see a budget stalemate. state, reflecting on the rounder years where we didn't have a budget. So the pressure campaign was definitely on as the first round of voting started about 3:00, and then it took 3 votes for them to actually pass the measure at 4:30 in the morning on Wednesday morning. That's right, before the sun even came up, a continuing session from the day before where they were scheduled to start at 11. So when I asked the governor the question of, people who are sleep deprived don't necessarily make the best decisions, how's it responsible to pass a budget in the early morning hours like that? He just merely said people wanted to go home. Everybody wanted to go home. And that tends to kind of indicate this, what I've experienced before covering the State House on the ground, this kind of last minute pressure to pass a budget. And in order for people to be able to go home. So remember, Dan, last week when we were talking, they had a scheduled Friday adjournment. They blasted right through that, and they worked through most of the holiday weekend. Thankfully, though, Dan, I was able to have Monday off.
We'll get you some more time off, Greg. I promise you that. Why don't we talk next about, Greg, what didn't get passed in the budget? The Bears came to Springfield with their hands out, looking for taxpayer help for a new stadium. Nothing got done there.
Nothing got done there. Not even a peep in any committees. And that's interesting. I would have expected some kind of subject matter hearing of sorts, but maybe we'll get that over the summertime. But regardless, the Chicago Bears, losing out on spring session, as were the White Sox, and even a women's soccer team in Chicago, was looking to be part of any kind of negotiations on using taxpayer resources for sports stadiums. None of that conversation happened at the Illinois State House this spring session. Now, they did ultimately pass 460 some odd bills, not as many as they passed last year at 665, but still, it's going to be a long summer of them passing along things to the governor that they did want to make law. But the Bears Stadium was not one of those. And actually, there were a couple of other measures that we still have yet to see some unfinished business on, especially dealing with the Prisoner Review Board. One measure passed the House, but didn't come up it passed the House, passed the Senate, amended, didn't come back up in the House. So we'll see what happens with the Prisoner Review Board. But you also had regulations on hemp products that people were looking to try to regulate. This substance called the Delta 8, which is a hemp derivative. A measure did pass the Senate to regulate the hemp industry, but that was never brought up in the House. So there's still some unfinished business that they may have to attend to over the summer. When the Bears are concerned, though, they were looking to get something done this spring so they could start construction on that lakefront stadium sometime over the summer. But that $4.7 billion project likely stalled until there's any kind of decision moving forward.
Greg, there was a lot of additional tax credits for certain specific types of businesses and industries in the budget. Why don't you talk about that? But one tax credit that was not included was an extension of the Invest in Kids school choice program.
So, that Invest in Kids program expired at the end of last year, and legislature was lobbied rather hard by families that benefited from the program. And again, the program is a privately funded tax credit program that those who donate to school granting organizations get a 75% Illinois income tax credit. Those dollars would then be given to families who have children in underperforming schools and would allow those families to send their kids to a private school of their choice. It was enacted in 2017, came about in 2018, had a sunset for December of 2023. Last year, legislators did not re-up that. There was thoughts that it could be re-upped during the fall veto session last year, but they neglected to do that as well. And here we are now at spring session, and not even a conversation about it anywhere at the State House in committees. May have been some bills filed, but those did not advance. So that program is effectively shut down moving forward, and a lot of families not going to be able to benefit from that program. So that's one tax credit they left on the table, and they have not addressed. But they passed a slew of other tax credits, Dan. including tax credits for local government under the guise of protecting journalism. The state has got a couple of different policies they're moving forward with. One is a $15,000 tax credit for local news outlets to have local journalists, and an additional $10,000 credit if they make a new local journalist's position. That's rather fascinating. They've also got tax credits in there for those who donate to community foundations, tax credits for community foundations that help pay off student loans of their employees, tax credits for the electric vehicle industry, a whole host of hundreds of millions of dollars in tax credits for different industries like quantum computing and the other sectors of new and emerging technologies. So a lot of tax credits all throughout, but no Invest in Kids school choice scholarship tax credit program. Will they address this sometime in the future? That remains to be seen, but there's been not a peep since, about this time last year.
I know teachers unions, powerful teacher unions were against Invest in Kids, the school choice scholarship program, claiming that it takes dollars away from public schools, although public school spending is at record highs in Chicago and across the state. The Invest in Kids school scholarship program, it helped lower income families who couldn't afford to send their kid, for example, to a private school and pay tuition at that private school, kids who might be in failing public school. It's meant for lower income families. Lots of minority families took advantage of it. This legislature the past several years has been all about equity. Does it surprise you then, essentially the teachers unions strong-armed the legislature not to advance it?
Yeah, it's a debate that you hear in the hallways of the Capitol when you have these conversations, and the power of the teachers union, no question, it's evident in the halls of the State House, and how much pressure they ultimately put on legislators to advance or to block something. You can see that really play out in how the quote sausage is made. And we'll see if that pressure continues or if this just comes to be, something of the past and people don't really talk about it again. I know one of the sponsors of an Invest in Kids rewrite of sorts, she didn't feel necessary to bring it up. And she's actually getting ready to leave the state legislature to retire. She's not seeking another term. So, will there be other advocates at the State House to pick this up, especially those in the minority, or rather the supermajority party, the Democratic caucus? Will there be a voice out there to carry that? That is yet to be seen, or what kind of retribution they would receive from the teachers union if they were to speak out and to advance that type of thing. Again, we'll keep watching.
Greg, of course, Illinois is known for its corruption. Longtime former House Speaker Michael Madigan faces 20-plus counts of corruption-related charges. He's scheduled to go to trial in October. You've had countless individuals, elected officials and lobbyists and whatnot, who have been convicted of crimes. How many former state governors served time in prison? Yet the legislature this session did pass some election changes, to election law, including campaign finance, that some say could foster even more corruption. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and if you recall, there was a measure that passed several weeks ago, earlier in May. The governor promptly signed it, and this was a measure that took a piece of child welfare legislation and gutted and replaced it to say that if you didn't run in the primary, then you could not get slated to be in the general election. Well, that measure is on hold right now after a Sangamon County Circuit Court judge put a temporary block as the challenge against that law continues. So we'll see how that goes. But outside of that, the legislature also approved what they call an election omnibus bill. For people who don't know what an omnibus bill is, we see this a lot at the State House, especially for things dealing with like workers' compensation changes or changes to Medicaid or to the state's bonding authority. They do these packaged bills. Well, the election omnibus bill had a whole lot of things in it, but one in particular allows for politicians to receive unlimited funding from political parties, essentially lifting the caps on how campaigns can be funded. But in a state like Illinois, where you have of all kinds of questions of how campaign finance has been used by party officials, and those party officials most times being elected officials, how that money is used to, curry favor, to line up votes and the like. Republicans pushing back, saying that this goes a little too far, and it's something they fear will help breed more of the level of alleged corruption against Madigan that has been found by guilty verdicts in other cases related. It's obviously something that has Republicans a bit concerned, especially as we head into the November election, where a lot's going to be at stake, and how much of how this is going to play into the November election. We'll watch and see.
Yeah, it's important to note that Madigan has denied the allegations against him, and he has pleaded not guilty. His trial, as we said, is coming up in October. Given the state's history of corruption, Greg, I'm sure they passed all kinds of ethics reforms this session, giving more power to the Illinois Legislative Inspector General, something we've been talking about and writing about for years at the Center Square. Any ethics reforms that you can think of? That's a loaded question, I know.
Watching the past few weeks and everything we got a state mushroom, Dan. Calvacia, I think it is. It's a giant white puffball. So we have that. Electric scooters. We've got electric scooters now defined. We redefined, offender to justice impacted individual. We're redefining unlawful use of a weapon to unlawful possession of a weapon. Even one of the tax credits I saw being floated before the package passed was changing non-felon or ex-felon to returning citizen or something to that effect. So we've got all that, but ethics reforms? No, I don't remember hearing much conversation about that.
Yeah, I know, Greg. I set you up for that. My apologies. Greg, we have about just a couple minutes, minute and a half or so left. We could talk about countless things that did happen, that did not happen in the during this latest legislative session. Anything more there you want to talk about? Of course, it's an election year. What's next for the legislature? Probably not going to see or hear from them until after the November election.
Yeah, so the legislature's off until after the election, likely, unless there's some kind of special session called, which who knows? There might be, a few lines in the budget that they need to clean up, which I've seen that before, where they have to come back for a session day and actually, do some cleanup. But they're off for the summer, and I anticipate we'll hear a lot about the 440 some odd measures that the legislature passed. The governor's going to be signing. So we'll be reporting on all of that as those bills get enacted. But yeah, we've got an election year. So members of the General Assembly are going to be back in their districts, campaigning, getting ready for November. We've got the ballot that still has yet to be certified. We're going to be tracking the ongoing case challenging that ending of slating of candidates for the November election. So the State Board of Elections is set January 3rd to open up the objections, June 3rd to open up the objections, but June 3rd also happens to be the next hearing in that case. So we'll be tracking that. So a lot for us to monitor all throughout the summer, and you can always follow us at thecentersquare.com.
And of course, every single Illinois House seat, it will be on the ballot in November, though there won't be choices in many of those races, as Greg's reported at thecentersquare.com, something like roughly half. There's no challenger on the ballot. About a half of the Senate's races will be on the ballot. Not a statewide elected office election year. Governor Pritzker and the other statewide officers were elected 2 years. Greg, thank you for joining us today. Thank you also for sticking it out the past few weeks at the Illinois legislature. Know you and your team have done an outstanding job and do need to get some rest. Listeners can keep up with our ongoing legislative session coverage and more at thecentersquare.com.